Good afternoon to you. 406 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Bobby Burack will be with us from Outkick at 4:30. We'll talk about the latest dramas surrounding a talented basketball player known as Caitlin Clark. And then at 5 o'clock, the former U.S. Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund is here. A lot to discuss with him, including that shooting at the Alexandria baseball field some years ago. The anniversary of that date today. The former police chief has some thoughts on that. He met with President Trump during that time frame. We'll talk to him about that and so much more. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The United States Supreme Court today, in a 6-3 ruling, said that the federal government far exceeded its authority when it decided to ban so-called bump stocks, an accessory that attaches to rifles that allows them to bounce off of the shoulder and then initiate another trigger pull, allowing users to fire lots of ammunition. But they said, you can't just ban these things. You need a law to do that. Congress needs to be involved. For more on this, I want to bring in Mark Smith. He's a constitutional attorney, host of the Four Boxes Diner YouTube channel, and the author of the book, First They Came for the Gun Owners. Mark, great to have you back with us, sir.
Hey, Vince, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, and I'm curious about your thoughts about this ruling today from the Supreme Court, sir.
Well, I think this is a major vindication, Vince, for the rule of law and actually also for President Trump's ability to pick good justices for the Supreme Court, because not only is this a repudiation of the notion that you can have an executive branch, the presidency, making the law, it also has some very powerful language in there that I think, even though this is not a Second Amendment case per se, Vince, this will have a major implication for Second Amendment cases down the road, including on attempts by certain blue states to ban AR-15s and semi-automatic rifles. So this is a major victory for the Second Amendment and the gun rights community today. There's just no way around it. The whole thing looks great. No complaints at all from the Second Amendment space. It is really an incredible decision. And what's interesting, Vince, is if you listen to the oral argument, there was some concern that the Supreme Court was a little unclear about how these bump stocks worked and what it meant technologically speaking. But if you look at the opinion, Vince, they literally broke down the details of the technology of firearms with diagrams and everything else, and they really nailed it, and they got it right. So applause is deserving of this U.S. Supreme Court, and of course to the three picks by President Trump: Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh.
So where this comes from, just to bring everyone back in time, it was Las Vegas 2017, that horrific shooting on the country concert there from the Mandalay Bay. And as a result of that, the shooter in that case apparently used bump stocks when firing those weapons. That's what led so much national consciousness to this particular accessory. And it was the Trump administration-led ATF that decided just to change what they consider to be a, quote, machine gun to include anything that has a bump stock, thus banning bump stocks. That brought us all the way to today, correct?
Yeah, that's essentially right, Vincent. And what's interesting is, and there's much debate about this. Now, I, of course, did not support, a bump stock ban. I thought it made no sense for a whole host of reasons. But what's quite interesting, if you go back in time to that event, there was concern that Congress might enact a law that would ban bump stocks. Now, it wasn't that bump stocks themselves were a big deal. This is kind of a range toy that people use on gun ranges and all that. The concern was that if Congress tried to redefine what a machine gun was to encompass bump stocks, no one knew the repercussions of Congress redefining a machine gun, which is a definition that's been on the books since the 1930s. And there was great concern among the Second Amendment community, Vince, that by redefining machine guns, they would do it in such a broad, terrible way that it would wind up inadvertently banning other things that were not intended.
Right.
So the Trump
like regular semi-automatic guns. If Congress was to start to come up with a classification that, it's a machine gun because you can fire it too quickly, then they might thus try and start banning semi-automatic weapons under the same rubric, right?
You're absolutely right, Vincent. One thing that's not in the definition of machine guns under federal law is the speed or the rate of fire. And the whole argument by the ATF in this case of Cargill versus Garland was that, this allows you to fire guns fast. And of course, the Supreme Court points out, people can fire guns fast if you pull the trigger fast. So
Right.
that's not an essential characteristic of a machine gun. You know, machine guns are something that, again, a single pull of the trigger by itself causes the gun to keep firing till it's empty. And that's not the case here with these bump stocks, because you actually require, as you know, Vince, multiple maneuvers by a human being. You got to hold the trigger, you got to lean forward on the gun and pull the foregrip. There's all sorts of things you have to do physically with the gun to make this keep firing.
Yes.
And again, the Supreme Court said, hey, it's a single function of the gun, not multiple functions of the person.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, that's why, you read the justices in the majority here, they're pointing directly to the statutory language is crystal clear. You pull the trigger once, you maintain it, the bullets keep firing. That's what they're talking about when they mean a machine gun. That is not what's happening with a semi-automatic rifle that has a bump stock on it.
Exactly right. And that's where the struggle was. Now, people forget that during oral argument, Justice Brown Jackson's talking about the possibility, I think, firing 800 rounds a second. So sort of the ignorance of firearms technology was literally all over the oral argument. But if you read this opinion, it's pretty clear that the Supreme Court did its homework carefully. I know during oral argument, Justice Barrett was specifically saying that she watched a whole host of videos about how these bump stocks worked, and she asked a series of hypotheticals. Well, these bump stocks are not even needed, right? You can literally bump fire a semi-automatic rifle with your belt loop and with rubber bands and all sorts of other things. And she's just like, this doesn't seem to make sense. And this, by the way, we have to remember that the ATF for many, many years said that bump stocks were perfectly fine. They clearly are not machine guns. They're perfectly legal. It was only this about face. And the Supreme Court today talks about that. They're like, look, this is like an abrupt 180-degree change. You made all these people that were law-abiding Americans felons overnight. Like, what are you doing? And the reason why I think this is such a big decision going forward, it really is showing that the Supreme Court is not going to let these administrative agencies, convert ordinary Americans into felons overnight by changing their interpretation of the law. They say, look, if Congress wants to do it, so be it, but you can't change your interpretation midstream and throw people in prison.
So I want to explore this a little bit more, in particular, like kind of the constitutionality of all this. As you point out, this is not really a Second Amendment case. It was really about the statutory text itself. And so, this is not something that the executive branch can just make up according to our Constitution. So the court ruling correctly on that front. But Justice Alito, in his concurring opinion today, was really emphasizing, look, this suggests that Congress needs to deal with it, so Congress can do it if they want to. Is it your view are there any Second Amendment questions that arise here in banning accessories like bump stocks? Does this run afoul of the Second Amendment if Congress does it at all?
Well, of course, you're absolutely right that today's decision does not speak directly to the Second Amendment. And the Justice Alito concurrence was really just kind of a regurgitation of the old famous song, I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill, right? You start with the Congress, it goes to the president. You know how it is. The Congress passes the laws, and the president enforces the laws. The courts interpret the laws. And that's all the Alito concurrence says, that, look, if you want to ban something, Congress, then let Congress do it. You can't ban stuff just by the president waving the magic wand. That's all the concurrence says. Now, is there a Second Amendment issue? Yeah, I think there quite very well could be, that if down the road Congress decided to ban a bump stock, yeah, I think there are legitimate Second Amendment arguments that, it's the sort of thing that impacts how a gun functions, and thus you could argue that if it's in common use by Americans for lawful purposes, it's protected, cannot be banned.
Right.
Again, we're nowhere near having to make that argument because I don't see Congress acting on bump stocks. The other interesting thing, Vince, here, and again, I'm not saying I'm an expert on the Las Vegas shooting, but I can tell you in my research that I've looked at this, it's not clear to me that the guns that, some people have this debate out there, but if you wanted to ban bump stocks today in Congress, I think you'd have to have hearings on this. Did the Las Vegas shooter actually use the guns with the bump stocks or not? He certainly was found with guns with bump stocks, but I'm not sure we know for a fact that he used the guns with bump stocks to fire to commit his terrible mass shooting. And again, if you want to start re-engaging on this issue, the first question is, well, did the guy even use the bump stock laden guns? I'm not sure that's been fully and completely answered yet from what I've seen. So that would be the first question. Did the guy even use it or not? And if he did, well, we can talk about it. If he didn't, well, then what's the point of banning the bump stocks? Again, these are things that people use for fun.
Yeah, that seems legitimate. Although, of course, there is some appetite. Of course, once again today, I saw Sheldon Whitehouse indicate that they need to move quickly to congressionally ban these bump stocks. So there is some appetite on Capitol Hill today as a result of this ruling. But going back to this idea that if they start banning more accessories in Congress, it does seem that it would become an affront to the Second Amendment for any number of reasons. I mean, there are all sorts of important accessories that go on guns that increase their effectiveness, their accuracy, which makes the gun safer, by the way, if it's more accurate. Things like, so when do we get to the point where they're banning magazine sizes, banning certain sights, banning certain accessories that improve the quality of the firearm? That seems that if you decrease the effectiveness of the gun, you're directly attacking the Second Amendment.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the Bruin decision and set aside even Heller for the moment, just look at the language in Bruin. It specifically says that anything that helps facilitate self-defense is basically protected under the Second Amendment. And again, scopes, red dots, sights, triggers, barrel shrouds, all these sorts of things help effectuate or facilitate a law-abiding citizen. And remember, that's the key metric here, right? How do law-abiding citizens use the firearms and things that help improve the use of firearms? And if it improves the ability to use firearms for things like self-defense among law-abiding Americans, that's the touchstone. It's not about what makes it easier or less hard or whatever for a criminal to misuse guns. The focus on constitutional rights is how do we protect citizens and their right to use these things lawfully? I mean, just because people can defame you or commit fraud doesn't mean we, engage in prior restraints and tell you to shut up because you might say something wrong under the First Amendment. We don't do that with the First Amendment. We certainly shouldn't do it with the Second Amendment. And the court's made that pretty clear that the focus is on law-abiding citizens and how they use guns and not on criminal thugs and how they misuse guns. It
is good. So in your view of the United States Supreme Court and all these rulings of late, do you think they're headed in the right direction here? My sense is that they are. They've done a lot to really restrain the excesses of the executive branch and trying to restore the obligations of passing laws to Congress, where, of course, the Constitution says it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think we're going through a period of constitutional restoration where the court is trying to slowly but surely, with these big cases, to restore American law from a place where it never should have left in the years and decades of liberal judicial activism that basically viewed the courts as just another legislative branch. If they couldn't get what they wanted in the we the people democracy, then they would just pass the baton to the courts, and the courts would give them the political or policy outcome that they desired. Gay marriage is a classic example where it was repeatedly rejected by we the people all across America at the federal level and so on. And next thing you know, you have a Supreme Court that, it just decides gay marriage is constitutional and is good. And that's the end of the debate. And this court, I think, is clearly saying there's an area for policymaking that should be done by the policymakers that are subject to the will of the people and can be voted in or voted out accordingly. And we are not going to do that. But we're going to make sure that you follow the law, and we're not going to let the president make the law and invade the province of Congress. And I think that's pretty clear what the Supreme Court is saying today, that if Congress wants to do something, that Congress should do it, and they'll pay the political price or not. You're not going to be able to get in through the back door with presidential action through the regulatory agency.
Meanwhile, the left, of course, construes all of this as a threat to, quote, democracy. But in principle, these decisions are actually restoring democratic principles every time they say, actually, no, this is up to the people, not up to the court.
Yes, I think when the left talks about we the people, they're really talking about the unelected bureaucrats, right? Whatever they're talking about is they want unelected bureaucrats at the ATF to set gun policy and not be subject to the votes because you can't vote out the civil servants. That's just the harsh reality of it. And yeah, we obviously know it's a slogan, but I'm not sure they mean it because whenever they get a decision that that they don't like by we the people, well, guess what? And last I checked, it was the left that was trying to keep Donald Trump off the ballots, which doesn't seem very democratic to me, but I know that doesn't speak to the ATF issues we're talking about today.
Yeah, no, it all comes from the same question, like thirst for power. Mark Smith, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom as always. Constitutional attorney with the Four Boxes Diner YouTube channel. So great to have you with us. President Trump has a brand new campaign ad now highlighting some of Joe Biden's wisest moments. It's just a mashup of some of the unbelievable quotes from the 46th president of the United States. Take a listen to this. You'll be familiar with, I think, most of the audio here.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping. She knows so long as she is denied, our freedom can never be secured. We'll never forget lying around and him lying around, actually. It is noteworthy that the percentage of women who register to vote and cast a ballot is consistently higher than the percentage of the men who do so. End of quote. Repeat the line. I'll lead an effective strategy to mobilize true international effort to pressure.
It ends with, this is paid for by Donald Trump for president. Hilarious. You do wonder, I guess, the expectations game. We're coming up on the debate now, and this idea that will Biden be able to even function on that stage? Obviously, this is the big kind of tortured debate that happens every time. You set expectations so low, just surviving the debate stage is a big success for him. But whatever. I just think at this point, I love mocking this guy. Mockery is the best, and he deserves every ounce of it for what he's done to this country. And he's just not with it. So, Trump has every right to highlight that. And also, as a political matter, voters notice, right? What are the things that they're assessing? First of all, their own lives are not going well. The financial situation, not good. Not good at all. Janet Yellen on TV trying to spin this week on CNBC as the host points out, hey, people preferred living in the Trump era. Their financial situation was a lot better, they say, in all of these surveys. And she has no idea how to answer that. And then the border, that's the big one. Everyone's concerned about that. The state of crime, despite the fact that the left keeps telling you it's down, they're lying to you about that too. And then Biden. The massive difference between, these guys are not that far apart in age. Donald Trump looks like he's 20 years younger in terms of how he presents in public. Joe Biden looks like he's 20 years older. I don't know how they did that. But that's the hand we've been dealt. Donald Trump emphasizing it this week with another hilarious ad. There's no campaign like this one. There really isn't. Coming up, Bobby Burack joins us from Outkick. We're going to talk to him about the left's latest attacks on a basketball player, one of the most talented in her generation. Why are they picking on Caitlin Clark? The details on that ahead. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, the former chief of the Capitol Police, Stephen Sund, will be with us at 5 o'clock. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. For some reason, the American left, and that includes a number of WNBA players, is upset about the emergence of one of the most talented basketball players of all time, Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark, just to remind people, is the NCAA point leader among both men and women. She just got out of college, now is a tremendous athlete for the Indiana Fever, one of the WNBA teams. She's selling out stadiums, including just about a week ago here in Washington, D.C., something unseen in the WNBA. It should be cause for celebration for women's sports, but instead we're seeing a lot of attacks on her and players, including players on the courts who are like trying to, cheap shot her because they're upset that she's getting all this attention. It's all so stupid. Caitlin Clark was asked by a reporter this week about racism or something, and listen to her once again gracious answers.
Caitlin, I know you mentioned that, you want to focus straight on basketball. Definitely respect that. But when, just to ask you directly, when people use your name for racism, misogyny, whatever, what is your response to that specifically?
Yeah, I think it's disappointing. I think, everybody in our world, deserves the same amount of respect. The women on our league deserve the same amount of respect. So people should not be using my name to push those agendas. It's disappointing. It's not acceptable. But yeah, this league is the league I grew up admiring and wanting to be a part of. Like, some of the women in this league were my biggest idols and role models growing up and helped me want to achieve this moment right here that I get to play in every single night. So, just treating every single woman in this league with the same amount of respect, I think is just a basic human thing that everybody should do.
Now, of course, all the racism is being directed at her. I don't know. I don't even know what that reporter was talking about. Meanwhile, there's a Connecticut Sun, which is another WNBA team, just so you know, guard by the name of Dejanay Carrington, who posted to social media this week, according to ESPN, that Caitlin Clark should do more to speak out about people using her name for inappropriate means. Quote, dog. How one cannot be bothered by their name being used to justify racism, bigotry, misogyny, xenophobia, homophobia, and the intersectionalities of them all is nuts. We all see this, beep. We all have a platform. We all have a voice, and they all hold weight. Silence is a luxury, Carrington said. That led to this moronic segment today. Stephen A. Smith over on ESPN had this to say.
She is a white young lady, and she's been a magnet in a way that has benefited the league in ways that others have not, even though their efforts have been worthy and deserving of being as celebrated, if not even more celebrated. And it's a reminder that no matter how far we believe that we have advanced as a society, there's still such a long way to go, because in the end, if you're white, you're bright, you're right, and as a result, the shine comes your way in the eyes of a lot of people in America. Let's transition. Very uncomfortable to touch on, but just factually correct. You have somebody that's a presidential candidate. What is his claim to fame? Make America great again. What have people interpreted that to mean? Make America white again. These are the things that critics have said.
That was all just, of course, completely made up. Bobby Burack is here. He's a columnist over at Outkick. He's been following this closely and endured that very long intro as I set that up for you. Bobby, great to have you with us, sir.
Vince, happy to be here.
What do you make of this? Caitlin Clark, it seems like every time there's a microphone put in front of her face, she's just very gracious. She just wants to play basketball. People are watching because they're excited to see a talented player, and yet there's all sorts of people who are trying to racialize this. Why?
Yeah, what's frustrating to me is that the story is much bigger than WNBA. I've had a lot of people say, well, why would I care? I don't watch the WNBA. I don't even watch sports. But it's indicative of a much bigger trend in that we have normalized discriminating and mistreating people because they're part of a supposedly advantaged group, in this case, a white straight woman in a league of mostly black lesbians. And the whole thing, I've been covering it for a while. It is disgusting. What's going on here is a league and a media essentially bullying a player into coming out in favor of this agenda. So I've seen a lot of people on the conservative side, even Clay and Jason Whitlock, people whom I like, made the case that this stems from the league being uncomfortable with a straight white woman. I think that's partially correct, but it's a bit deeper than that. See, there are a lot of women, white, straight, in the WNBA who are liked by the mean girls, the black lesbians who make up the majority. However, those white girls have come out and either A, pretended to acknowledge their white privilege, apologize for it, or have raised awareness for Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ causes, including Cameron Brick, who just 2 weeks ago said, yes, I acknowledge that being white and female benefits me. So this all comes down to a quote that ESPN host Bomani Jones said last December, and that is, quote, you can never be 100% sure a white person is not racist until they show you otherwise. So what that means is, according to the minds of the WNBA, a white person is racist by default until proven otherwise, and Caitlin Clark has not proven otherwise.
Well, isn't that a racist assumption to say that somebody's views are defined by their skin color?
Of course, absolutely, it's racist. It's all racist, and that is exactly what's happening. And you saw the reporters yesterday, they were trying to get Caitlin Clark to come out and defend the black women who have been bullying, harassing her, and smearing her on the court and on social media. How backwards is that? It's a type of mind virus that makes no sense.
So the holding by people like Stephen A. Smith that we just played is that, well, the only reason that Caitlin Clark is drawing eyeballs to the WNBA is because she's a white girl. That's a straight white girl. That's the suggestion here. But as I said in the lead-in, first of all, she's the single highest NCAA point scorer of all time among both men and women. So it's not like she's not getting attention based on the merits. And correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby Burack, but some of the most famous sports stars, regardless of the audience's color throughout American history, have been black athletes. I didn't watch Michael Jordan because he was black. I watched him because he could fly. I didn't watch Simone Biles dominate the Olympics because she was black. I did it because she was extraordinary. I didn't watch Michael Phelps because he was white. I did it because he's lightning in the water. Or Usain Bolt, the guy is incredible. Or Tom Brady or Muhammad Ali. You pick these athletes, it's irrelevant what their skin color is and entirely relevant what their talent is. Caitlin Clark is talented. People are watching.
According to a Pew study, the 12 most famous athletes in American sports history are all black. Not a single one's white. The first white person comes out at 13. I believe it's Tom Brady. Or maybe it's Larry Bird. I think it's Tom Brady. But the first 12 are all black. Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, goes on and on. So he's lying. But Stephen A., why I say he's lying and he's not falling for it, and I emailed Stephen A. this morning. He usually sometimes responds. He hasn't, because he came out and said the exact opposite a week ago and said that what you and I are saying is that the women in WNBA dislike Caitlin Clark because she's white, but as per usual, when the NAACP and black community come after Stephen A., he caves. People might remember last month he went on Fox News and said, well, there's a poll that says black men are sympathizing with Donald Trump over the persecution he faces. And then he was eviscerated by same groups, NAACP, New York Times, MSNBC, and he came out and apologized. So Stephen A.'s commentary today was more to make up for what he said last week, which was the truth.
Yeah, it's just it strikes me as just so crazy that this is even a real thing, considering that Caitlin Clark has done nothing but play basketball. That's it, and she's stayed completely focused on that. She's not. There's all sorts of athletes who are provocative and troublemakers and try and cause drama. She's the literal opposite of that.
Of course, and this is part of a large trend that we keep seeing, and that is white people. It goes both ways. I think this is what's dangerous to me. Society is programming black people to look at white people and their success as a product of systemic advantages. And that's what you keep seeing from the New York Times and USA Today saying, well, people gravitate towards Caitlin Clark because she's white, and this is a majority white country. But on the other hand, we have the same development coming where we're now programmed to believe black people have only made it because of DEI. Some that's true, but it's not true of all of them. But the end result there is both white and black people are looking at each other as privileged and not worthy. And this is exactly how a country becomes permanently divided and hateful.
That's right. And so all of the people who are projecting racism onto Caitlin Clark, or the people who like watching her play basketball, are, of course, actually advancing bigotry themselves. But at its core, the decision to do that is divisive and destructive rather than productive.
Of course. Yeah, and for her, it's so difficult because she's 22 years old.
Yeah. And
as a straight white girl, due to the double standards of racial commentary, she can't come out and say, hey, I'm being bullied because I'm white. The media and society would crush her for it. If it was a black woman, she could come out and say, hey, what's happening is wrong. We need to stop this. Caitlin Clark can't do that. That's why it's so important that people like you and I raise awareness, because she can't. She'll lose endorsements if she portrays herself as a victim. So it's a very difficult position for her. And quite frankly, I expect her to cave. I think eventually she's going to come out and say, white privilege is real. Black women have had it difficult, and that will ease some of the tensions. And while you could say that's very cowardly, I think it is in many cases. Howard Stern did it. Mark Cuban did it. I don't know if she has a choice because tensions are so high, Vince. I think she's in danger of someone seriously injuring her. If they shove her around, hip check her, elbow her in the face, I don't see how this ends well by any means.
I've seen some of these clips of her. I'll admit I've maybe watched a game or two of Caitlin Clark. It is fun to watch, but not the thing I'm obsessing over. But I've seen some of these clips. Has that been the case that there are excessive cheap shots being thrown in her direction compared to other women?
Oh, there's no question. And what's jarring is the league and refs aren't doing anything about it. Like, why women can elbow Caitlin Clark in the face, but they can't elbow other women? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. That Kennedy Carter aggressively charged into her in the hip, and they didn't even fine her. There have been women who have gently shoved other women have been fined. I think the league is even afraid of being called racist right now.
Wow. And then the Olympic decision, how meaningful was that in your eyes, the fact that they decided to exclude the rookie, Caitlin Clark, from the roster?
Yeah, I wasn't that up in arms about it because, like, it's one of two things. Did she earn a spot on it? Technically, no. But then again, same with the NBA team, have allowed people on because it's better for the brand. Putting Caitlin Clark on the Olympic team would have raised awareness, ratings, it would have brought attention to the tournament, and elevated all the women around her. See, that's what nobody talks about. Caitlin Clark is so popular that the black women around her who despise her are becoming more famous. In fact, I'm writing that column right now. But yes, based on her play on the court, she hasn't earned a spot because she's a rookie. Very few players come into any league as one of the 12 best.
Yeah. Yeah, but then again, even the Dream Team had a college player on it, so you might allow for
exactly
a junior player
before.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. All right. Hey, as always, Bobby Burack, thanks for breaking all of that down for us and telling the truth that so few will. Really appreciate your time, sir, as always. All right, coming up here in a few minutes, I've got former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund joining us. A lot to discuss with him as we get this audio of Nancy Pelosi this week, admitting that it's her fault that the National Guard wasn't called in on January 6th. Also, the Oversight Committee, one of the subcommittees on oversight, led by Congressman Barry Loudermilk, has released a timeline today of the National Guard and the attempts to call them on January 6th of 2021, and points out that it was Stephen Sund, our guest coming up, who asked the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms and the House Sergeant-at-Arms for assistance. That was on January 3rd that he put that request in, and he was denied. He was denied National Guard support. And this timeline makes it really clear that it was Chief Sund who just keeps on asking over and over, hey, can I get some National Guard support? And it's the people who work for Nancy Pelosi, the House Sergeant-at-Arms, who keeps denying him. So Chief Sund will be able to give us some perspective on that. Also, today is an anniversary of a number of events. One is the birth of Donald Trump. It's his birthday today. It's also Flag Day today. So if, like Trump, hug the stars and stripes if you get an opportunity today. And then it's also the anniversary of the shooting at that Alexandria baseball field. Just years ago, 2017, that awful shooting on the Republican congressmen who were there by a Bernie Sanders volunteer. Chief Sund has a perspective on that because obviously Capitol Police were there. They were the responders to be able to fire back at that attacker. And he's got a personal story to tell about his experience with President Trump and the First Lady at the time, Melania Trump. We'll talk to him about all of those things in mere moments when we're joined by Chief Sund. And, of course, we'll take your calls at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. And I'm going to take a closer look at Joe Biden's overseas trip, hanging out in Italy. Wouldn't you like a trip to Italy right now? That'd be really nice, a trip to Italy, maybe fly on Air Force One to get there. Yeah, while he's been there, the international press has been taking a close look at his behavior, and they're not impressed. In fact, they're very worried about the health of the President of the United States. Details on that and so much more ahead.